Committee will come to order. I want to welcome our witness again, the Commissioner for the Internal Revenue Service, Mr. John Koskinen. And we'll get to your, you know how this works, Mr. Koskinen. You've been here a few times with this, and we appreciate you coming back. Start with opening statements, as is customary. Subcommittee meets today to continue our oversight of the IRS and its targeting of conservative groups. In an interview in July, Commissioner John Koskinen talked about the congressional investigations into the targeting. He said, quote, "There are some people who don't want a straight story. They don't want this to end." Commissioner Koskinen went on to say, "I'm not sure if people really want a special prosecutor because that would shut everything down. Special prosecutor then would have sole domain over this, and so you wouldn't be holding all these fun hearings every week or two." We'll get this in my questioning, Mr. Koskinen, but I can tell you one thing. We do want a special prosecutor. Every single Republican voted for it. It's not some fun and games we're playing here. And 26 Democrats voted for the resolution as well. It's not about fun. It's not about amusement. We're here because of the constant flood of false and misleading statements made by the IRS. The reason the American people can't get a straight story is because the IRS won't give them one. In March of 2012, then IRS Commissioner Doug Shulman gave assurances to the Ways and Means Committee that the IRS was not targeting conservatives. We know now that that was not accurate. In April 2012, Lois Lerner told our staff that the way the IRS was treating conservative groups was part of the, quote, ordinary course of the application process. We now know that was not true either. On May 10th, 2013, Ms. Lerner apologized for targeting by responding to a planted question at an ABA conference here in town. By planting the question, Lerner tried to downplay the misconduct and mislead the public. That same day, Lois Lerner blamed, quote, lying people in Cincinnati for the targeting. We know that wasn't true either. We know the targeting went all the way up to Washington, D.C. President Obama's press secretary, Jay Carney, blamed the targeting on line employees in Cincinnati. That's not accurate. The President himself attributed targeting to, quote, boneheaded decisions by Cincinnati employees. Also not accurate. When we finally got witnesses before the committee in public session, the misleading statements continued. When I had the chance to question Mr. Shulman, I asked him how many times he went to the White House. He said, "I don't have a number." But of course, he did remember that he attended the Easter egg roll at the White House. Imagine that. The IRS commissioner has no idea how often he visited the White House, but what stuck out was the Easter egg roll, even though he went to the White House 157 times. Unprecedented for an Internal Revenue Service commissioner. Acting Commissioner Werfel testified on August 2nd, 2013 that the IRS would produce every single Lois Lerner email and that he would, quote, ask the team to prioritize that. We now know from testimony of IRS employees involved in document production that there was no prioritization of those. The IRS has told us that it takes Section 6103, part of the code that protects confidential taxpayer information. It takes it, quote, very seriously. That is what they say. That's why they say it takes so long to get the documents. Yet, we have changing interpretations of 6103, redacting information when it suits the IRS's interest, unredacting that information when it suggests violations of federal law. And now we know that in 2010, the IRS illegally sent the FBI 1.1 million pages of nonprofit information, including confidential taxpayer information protected by 6103. Commissioner Koskinen, during your first appearance here, March 26th, when asked whether you would produce all of Lois Lerner's emails, you testified, "Yes, we will do that." Well, obviously, we now know you can't possibly produce every single Lois Lerner email because you've lost some of them. Then the Commissioner Koskinen, you told Congress that the IRS had confirmed that backup tapes no longer existed. But the IG has told us that backup tapes do exist and that the IRS did not search 760 Exchange server drives because you didn't even know you had them. Commissioner Koskinen, you testified that you remember being told in April about Lois Lerner's missing emails. And you didn't tell Congress, the Justice Department, the FBI, or most importantly, the American people until June 13th. But we now know Kate Duvall, your chief counsel, knew in February. She even told the Treasury Department in April. So the IRS told its political bosses in the administration before telling those of us who are investigating the IRS, another effort to mislead the American public. Commissioner, you testified that the reason you delayed telling Congress was that you went to great lengths, and spent, quote, a significant amount of money to make sure that no email was missing. But the Inspector General tells us that emails from at least 8 employees are missing. We learned the IRS does not even archive its office communication messages. We learned the IRS wiped Lois Lerner's BlackBerry after Congress had started asking questions about this issue. And we learned from an IRS IT employee that Lois Lerner kept a large amount of data on her hard drive, and he recommended that she back it up. He was told that Ms. Lerner did not have time to do that, and it was not her responsibility. So, Mr. Koskinen, if the IRS was truly trying to ensure that no email was missing, you guys did a pretty bad job. And that's why we've invited you back here today. There's been an ever-changing story coming out of the IRS about the targeting of conservative groups and missing emails. Each time you testify, Mr. Koskinen, we later learn something you said wasn't right. So if you refuse to give you've refused to give the American people a straight story, but we hope today that they can start to get a straight story, start to get at the truth, and not get the runaround that we've gotten before. And that's why we have you back today. And with that, I yield to the ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner Koskinen, for testifying before this committee yet again. Your appearance before this committee is becoming quite the recurring event, kind of like the movie Groundhog Day around here. I am becoming increasingly concerned at this point that committee Republicans are no longer using these hearings for the purpose of investigating what happened to the groups that were the subject of the IG's May 14, 2013 report. What we're doing here seems to be something entirely different. Instead, what's happening here is we have people desperately searching for information about the IRS's response to the committee's investigation. Mr. Chairman, counting today, Mr. Koskinen has testified 4 times before this committee in the past several months, and at least 7 times before House committees in toto this year. We all have to agree that the purpose of this committee is not publicly to harass Federal agency heads. It is to conduct responsible oversight on a host of legitimate critical issues within our jurisdiction. I believe that these repeated hearings, continuing again today, are not only a badgering of witnesses, but an abuse of authority and a dereliction of this committee's duty in its entirety. I think it's abundantly clear that Chairman Issa and Chairman Camp are also in some kind of a taxpayer-funded foot race to see who can make the most headlines about Lois Lerner's lost emails. I also, again, want to address Republican claims that the alleged targeting of conservative groups is a government-wide conspiracy initiated after the Supreme Court's 2010 decision in Citizens United, a conspiracy involving the President, the IRS, the Department of Justice, and every other Federal agency. This committee has obtained no evidence linking these accusations to what we all now know were inappropriate criteria used by IRS employees in Cincinnati to screen applications for tax-exempt status. The IRS has fully cooperated and provided congressional investigations of the alleged targeting with more than 800,000 pages of documents. These congressional investigations have cost the IRS at least $18 million so far, and none of the evidence has shown any political motivation or White House involvement. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the dais have chosen to overlook the funneling of dark money into the political system of the United States. Republicans have demanded accountability from the IRS, but have not demanded the same thing from the corporations who influence our national elections. In January 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision in Citizens United, ruled that political spending is a form of protected speech under the First Amendment, and that the government may not prohibit artificial entities from spending money to support or oppose a specific candidate in an election, ruling essentially that corporations are not artificial entities, that they have First Amendment rights, because after all, corporations are people, my friend. Citizens United allowed for-profit corporations, unions, and nonprofit groups to raise unlimited funds and register for tax-exempt status under the 501c4 designation, and the IRS became flooded with applications for this kind of status. 501c4 designation is exclusively meant for organizations whose primary activity is social welfare, defined in the tax code as making charitable, educational, and recreational contributions to a community. Now, while 501c4s are not barred from participating in political campaigns, it is stated plainly and clearly that political participation must be an, quote, insubstantial, unquote, amount of the group's overall activity, accounting for less than 50% of expenditures. The IRS's job was to make sure that these groups were following the rules so that they weren't taking tax breaks meant only for groups contributing to the community, not hiding the influence that a select few individuals have on our nation's electoral politics. I am also deeply concerned by the recent reports from the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations regarding the management failures of the IRS and TIGTA in investigating alleged targeting of 501c4s. While the subcommittee's investigation found no evidence of IRS political bias, PSI found that the Inspector General's exclusion of any analysis of how liberal or progressive groups were treated distorted the audit's findings and significantly damaged public confidence in the impartiality of the IRS. And, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter the September 5, 2014 PSI report into the record.
Without objection.
We must shift our focus toward establishing a more objective and transparent set of standards for evaluating 501c4 applicants involved in political activities. As I've stated in previous hearings, this is about groups doing everything they can do to hide where they get their money, obscure their true intentions, and have undue influence on the political system of our country tax-free. Anonymous money in politics is something we don't need in this country, and something I've repeatedly said disrupts the normal and natural democratic process and must be changed. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yep.
I would just point out with the report the gentleman asked to be put in the record, which we did, the ranking member of that committee disagreed strongly and sort of in an unprecedented fashion did not sign on to the report. And that, of course, is Senator McCain, who I might add is somewhat well known for the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law. But yet he says that report had significant flaws and would not sign on to it, as is the custom with that committee in the United States Senate. And with that, I would recognize the gentleman from California, the chairman of the full committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Commissioner, welcome back. It is apparently Groundhog Day, and we have a Pennsylvania member who knows about these things, because he certainly is repeating some of the same tired lines we heard from the beginning of this investigation. And during questioning, I may ask you some of these, but I just want to make a couple of quick points. The ranking member uses the word tax exempt, but of course, we've already made clear that a 501c4 only has an exemption from having to take other people's post-tax paid money and pay some sort of a tax revenue again. Ultimately, if a 501c4 takes $100,000 from 1,000 people, $100 apiece, and spends it on some common effort and exhausts all of it, there really wouldn't be any difference whether it was a C Corp or a 501c3 or 501c4. At the end of the day, a 501c4 or a conventional C corporation, a business, for-profit business, ultimately, at the end of the day, if it exhausts all the money and has no profit, there's no tax. It's always amazing to me that people want to pretend that a 501c4 is a charity. It's not. People don't get a tax deduction. They don't get a write-off for giving to it. There is no special treatment. And every time we establish that, the minority wants to continue to act like the taxpayers are funding this. There's no taxpayer funding. More importantly, the ranking member, erroneous beyond all possible evidence, continues to say Cincinnati. Mr. Commissioner, you know that Lois Lerner has been referred for criminal prosecution for her role. The American Bar Association has to look at her. The IG has to look at her, because ultimately she was pivotal to denying these 501c4s their rights, and her missing emails, although deeply wanted, aren't completely necessary, because the ones that we've seen shows that she calls conservatives the A word with a hole afterwards. She refers with disdain to conservatives. She's an active liberal, and it's clear her actions were set out to come to the detriment of conservatives. So you, Mr. Ranking Member, can bash the IG anytime you want, and you can say Cincinnati as many times as you want. But ultimately, it was Lois Lerner who violated the law, went before the Bar Association, and made a speech where she planted a question in order to pre-release and try to mislead people as to what she had been doing and try to cast the blame on a group of innocent people in Cincinnati. This committee has interviewed all of the Cincinnati people. Some of them very bravely said these things should have been approved, and they recommended that. Some of them said nothing. Some of them might even have been, in fact, in agreement with Lois Lerner. But lastly, this Chairman is sick and tired of a false narrative coming from the Democrats that implies that we keep pointing to the President or keep pointing to somebody else. The fact is, we've followed the trail where it leads, and we've seen it lead to Lois Lerner, the subject of the missing emails, the subject of the emails we've seen. And we've made that point very clear. No one in my key staff and none of my congressional leaders here on the committee have made assertions directly about the President. Yes, we are interested in seeing why a Commissioner would endlessly go back and forth to the White House 100 times more than historically reasonable, and it wasn't all for an Easter egg hunt. We don't know who he talked to. What we do care about is this. There have been bad things happening before your watch, Mr. Commissioner, and you came in to help fix it. That includes the leakage of information that shouldn't leak out of the IRS, always claimed to be accidental, but it happened. It includes that now famous transfer of over 1 million records, if you will, to Department of Justice under Lois Lerner's watch, clearly, in this member's opinion, attempting to encourage the Department of Justice to get involved in a prosecution. We are deeply concerned with over $1 billion spent, and we can't maintain a few emails reliably. We are concerned with all of these areas. And I would hope at some point the minority would quit acting as though they ever were part of this investigation, as though they ever thought there was any legitimacy, and start recognizing that once a false statement made by the minority has been disproved, such as Cincinnati was responsible, that they wouldn't expose us to Groundhog Day again by bringing up something that is patently untrue and disproven. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your continuing to seek the truth. I appreciate the Commissioner continuing to come here, sometimes not as the witness we called but as a voluntary witness who believes he can answer our questions. I am concerned that he doesn't, Mr. Commissioner, you don't always come here with the answers that ultimately seem to be accurate. That's not uncommon before this committee. I think the Chairman would like to give you an opportunity to correct or to further enlighten us in a lot of areas, and I look forward to that. I know that your job as part of Article 2 of the Constitution, the executive branch, is important. Our job as Article 1 is important for oversight and appropriation. And I, for one, would hope that never again from the dais will I hear people who think that if the Supreme Court rules, it's open to ridicule, rather than the recognition that they are the final words on what is or is not constitutional. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your indulgence. I yield back.
I thank the Chairman for his statement. Members may have 7 days to submit opening statements for the record. Mr. Costin, you've done this a few times. Please stand up. Pursuant to committee rules, we swear in witnesses. Please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witness has answered in the affirmative. Mr. Costin, you get your opening statement, and then we'll get right to questions. And thank you again for being here.
Chairman Jordan, Chairman Issa, Ranking Member Cartwright, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to update you on the work being done by the IRS to cooperate with the investigations into the findings by the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration regarding the improper criteria used in processing applications for tax-exempt status. I will also discuss the steps we have taken and continue to take to remedy the issues discussed in TIGTA's May 2013 report and in subsequent hearings. The IRS remains committed to cooperating fully with the Oversight Committee investigations, and we continue to make every effort to fulfill information requests from Congress and the other investigating entities. To date, the IRS has produced more than 1 million pages of unredacted documents to the tax writing committees and more than 810,000 pages of redacted documents to the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee and the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. Related to the IRS document production, I want to take the opportunity to clear up a misunderstanding that has arisen about our records retention practices. Recently, there were erroneous press reports that the IRS backs up information by sending it to a government-wide database. I want to clarify there is no system outside the IRS, government or otherwise, that the IRS uses to store emails. I'd also like to clear up some confusion about the IRS-issued BlackBerry device used by former agency executive Lois Lerner. Ms. Lerner's BlackBerry was replaced in February 2012 with a newer model as part of an ongoing BlackBerry update that involved about 5,000 IRS employees. Because her old BlackBerry was obsolete, it was disposed of under standard IRS recycling procedures at that time. This included erasing any information on the device to prevent dissemination of any taxpayer-sensitive information that might be on it. The information was not transferred to the new BlackBerry because our BlackBerries only display email that is managed by the employee's Microsoft Outlook mailbox, which is maintained on the IRS's servers. The replacement BlackBerry that Ms. Lerner received in 2012 and used from that point on is in TIGTA's possession. Now that the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation has released the report of its investigation, we look forward to the conclusion of other investigations in the very near future. We stand ready to receive the recommendations of the investigators, which we believe will help to ensure that the problems that arose never happen again. To further guard against such problems as we go forward, the IRS has also been implementing managerial and operational improvements in the determination process for tax-exempt status and more broadly throughout the agency. As part of this work, the IRS has completed action on all 9 recommendations in the TIGTA report. Some of the actions taken include improving employee training in the determinations area, creating a new procedure for documenting why applications are chosen for further review, and establishing a formal process for employees in the determination unit to request help from our technical experts. We've also established an agency-wide enterprise risk management program. This has involved creating risk management liaisons in each area of our operation and providing for the regular identification and analysis of risks to be eliminated and managed across the agency. We are working to create a culture where employees are encouraged to report any issues or problems that occur. My goal is to have employees understand that the only problems we can't solve are the ones we don't know about. As a corollary to that effort, we are encouraging the flow of information from frontline employees up through the organization, as well as to frontline employees from senior managers. Another area where the IRS is making improvements involves the retention of official records. We've been consulting with the National Archives and Records Administration, or NARA, to ensure that we are fully aligned with their standards for managing and storing emails deemed to be Federal records. As a first step, We will implement an interim policy that requires our executives' email records to be retained on secure servers rather than on their hard drives. Our next step will be to purchase the necessary equipment and technology to allow us to expand this approach to other employees and to extend the secure storage periods beyond those stipulated in the NARA standards. Finally, our ultimate goal is to ensure that all email records are not only securely saved and stored, but also easily retrievable. This result would require funds we do not presently have, but we continue to look for other solutions, and we are holding discussions with other government agencies with similar challenges. This concludes my testimony, and I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Koskinen. Commissioner, I'd planned to do my round of questioning on the fact that you had told us, you had confirmed that there were no backup tapes, and we've subsequently learned there are backup tapes. You didn't tell us about servers. We've learned that there are now servers that contain this information, and a host of other things. But I want to go to something the staff just pointed out to me just recently, and just yesterday, and I reread it here as I walked in. I want to go to a statement that you made in an interview a couple months ago. And in fact, if we have that, let's put it on the screen.
We'll got a hard copy of that?
Yeah, we can. If we can give you a hard copy here too. Although actually, we got a slide that actually is big enough.
It's a good eye test.
Yeah, we can read. If we can get a copy to the commissioner, that'd be great. Commissioner, let's go to that second. Let's go to the highlighted one here. There are some people who don't want to stray. Now, is this a statement that you made, Mr. Commissioner? We'll let you look at it and see if you made this statement. It's reported that you did.
Yes, I recognize that.
All right. So I'm going to go to the underlines. There are some people who don't want a straight story. They don't want this to end. Who's the they? Who are you referring to?
Just talking generally about the fact that a year and a half ago, the IG issued a report noting that there were management issues at the IRS that needed to be addressed. And since then, we have, certainly in the last several months, with regard to that basic issue, have not furthered the discussion very far. We've, as I've said, taken all the actions that the IG recommended.
You didn't answer my question, Mr. Commissioner. Who's the they?
It's a general statement. I did not have anybody in particular in mind.
There are some people. Well, let me go back to the one before then. Who's the some people in the sentence before, the clause before? There are some people who don't want a straight story. Who's the some people?
That's just a general statement, my reaction to the process.
So this is what I can't understand. What people wouldn't want the truth? Because you're saying, well, let's go to this. Let's go to that. What's straight story? So, who are the people who don't want a straight story? Thereby meaning, who are the people who want a false story? Do you know who they are?
Well, and there have been examples. An example would be that a claim is made as a result of an passing conversation with the Justice Department.
Mr. Commissioner, you're the one that look.
Can I answer the question?
You can answer the question. You can't just talk.
Well,
there are some people who don't want a straight story. All I'm asking you is, you said this, I didn't. So you should know who the some people and the they are in the two sentences you said. Who are these some people? Who is the they? Who are the they, to use the right English? Who are the they who don't want the truth? I want to know who those people are.
They are the people who issue information without substantial basis that turns out to be erroneous.
Is the some people in that paragraph, go down to the next paragraph, where it says, I'm not sure people really want a special prosecutor. Are the people in that sentence the same as the some people in the sentence above?
Not necessarily. They're two different statements. If you would like, I'd like to explain the first.
So are you referring to people who are you referring to who don't want a special prosecutor?
I'm referring there to the fact that, as I say, that a special prosecutor.
Are you referring to the people who actually voted for a special prosecutor? Is that who you're referring to? Because that's the context of the special prosecutor. Do you think the individual member of the Congress who sponsored the legislation, the resolution for a special prosecutor, doesn't want a special prosecutor?
I think that's right. Although I think that
you don't think I want the special prosecutor to happen? I happen to be the guy who sponsored the resolution. You know how many Republicans voted for it, Mr. Commissioner?
No.
224. Which one of those 224 Republican members doesn't really want a special prosecutor?
I'm sure they all think they do.
But that's not what you said. You said some of them don't. I'm asking you which ones don't.
I didn't refer to any Republicans. I just said as a conceptual matter, there are people.
Well, let me ask you about the other party then. You know how many Democrats voted for the special prosecutor?
There are a whole series of people
26, I know.
Good.
26 of them. 26 of them said it's so important, we're willing to go against what our Attorney General has recommended. We want a special prosecutor. Are you saying some of those 26 Democrats are the same people who don't want a special prosecutor, even though they voted for it?
I'm just saying that a special prosecutor would, in effect, take total jurisdiction over all of this, and that wouldn't.
Oh, and that's the point. And then your point is, if there's a special prosecutor, we wouldn't be able to have these, quote, fun hearings. And that's the part that just frosts me and more importantly, the American people. The American people don't think this is fun. They want the truth. And so far what's happened, every single time you've come in front of this committee, you have told us something that later turned out not to be accurate. You said you could confirm there are no backup tapes, and the IG says, in fact, there are backup tapes.
Okay, you want to have a discussion about that?
We will, but unfortunately I'm out of time. Because we spent so much time on 2 sentences you made that you can't even tell us who you're referring to. I would love to get into that, but I'm out of time. I have to recognize the ranking member because you can't tell me who's the they you're referring to. You can't tell me who the some people you're referring to, and you can't tell me who wouldn't want the truth, even though you allege that there are members of Congress who don't want the truth and don't want the special prosecutor that they voted for.
I can't tell
you alleged all those things, and you couldn't tell me the answer to any of that, and so now, unfortunately, I have to recognize the ranking member.
Could I just note, I can't tell you because you won't let me answer the question. But
no, I gave you plenty of time to answer the question. You wouldn't answer those questions.
The record would show I was not given plenty of time to answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before the record will show you were given plenty of time to tell me who the they is in the sentence you said, who the some people were in the sentence you said, who doesn't want a straight story, who doesn't want a truth. You were given ample time to answer those, and you didn't do it. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is wrecking.
Fine. I'd be happy to look at the record with you and demonstrate that as I started to answer that question, you said, I want an answer, I don't want you to talk on, and I was going to give you examples, and then you cut me off. And I'm happy to have you cut me off, but I'm not happy to have you misrepresent what my statement was.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I will reiterate that we're not in Washington and we're not in Cincinnati today. We're back home in Punxsutawney. So let me ask you this, Mr. Koskinen. Would you like to amplify your answer to the slew of questions you just got from the Chairman?
I would appreciate that opportunity.
Go ahead.
With regard to the statement that I've come up here and then say things that aren't true, for instance, about the backup tapes, it is not yet clear whether there are any backup tapes that have any information on them. In all of my hearings, I've testified at some length about the fact that we have disaster recovery tapes, that we keep them for 6 months. We've actually kept them all now since December of 2012. And then those backup tapes are recycled. Never did I say they disappeared. I said they were recycled. I have not talked to the IG. He doesn't give me regular updates about this, but I do understand.
The gentleman yield for just to clarify.
Do I get the answer, or do you want to continue?
He's still answering the whole raft of questions you gave him so far.
Got it.
Go ahead.
The IG, as I understand it, and I understand some of that from releases out of this committee, the IG has taken a series of tapes to go and see if there's anything on them. But the tapes he has taken are tapes that, in fact, we've talked about. They are the 6-month disaster recovery tapes that are recycled and stored and available until they're not usable. There are no new tapes that are out there that the IG has found. He's simply looking at that supply of tapes. I have encouraged him to do that. I have told him if he can find more emails, that would be terrific, because we would support that. With regard to the issue of the truth, I have started to explain that there are people who quickly put out information that does not turn out to be true that they could have checked. The issue about whether the IRS has some participation in some government-wide backup system, which immediately led to press reports and comments from other people that there were somehow now emails for Lois Lerner that existed that we just didn't either want to spend the money or the time to go find, turned out to be totally untrue. Somebody could have called us and we would have made it clear to them that whatever the conversation was, which I'm not privy to, obviously, in passing with the Justice Department attorney, was with regard to the disaster recovery tapes that we've talked about in at least 3 different hearings. I'm sorry. Thank you for the opportunity.
Certainly. Now, Mr. Koskinen, when you were also given a number of questions about the remarks you made in July of 2014 Do you want to further explain what the gist of those remarks?
Just to those remarks, and I was going to say, there are some people who, rather than calling us and saying, hey, do you have a government-wide backup system you participated in, you forgot about, could have been told, no, we don't have one. The only thing we have are disaster recovery tapes that I've provided all the accurate information I can. Somebody could have called us and said, well, do the backup tapes, disaster recovery tapes exist? And I would have repeated for them, sure, we keep them now from December of 2012. And the ones that we recorded over get recorded over several times. So there's a big stack of them. I don't know where they are, but we've never said that they all disappeared. In fact, I had a long conversation and exchange with somebody about the fact that we use them over and over until they are unusable, and then we destroy them at that time. So the fact that the IG, which we've supported, I've told the IG, look, anything you want, you can have. Any place you can find more emails, I would be delighted. The fact that the IG has taken some of those is not new news unless you decide you want to put it out as new news.
So let me get this straight, Mr. Koskinen. You're here trying to comply with all the requests for information. Is that correct?
Yes.
You're here to be helpful in this investigation, right?
To the extent we can.
And you're also saying that you're willing to be helpful. All they have to do is call your office and say, well, can you clarify this response? Can you clarify that? Can you give us more information? And you're willing to put up with that as well. Is that correct?
It's not putting up. In fact, the chairman was very thoughtful and sent me a letter in advance of the hearing with some questions that he gave me the opportunity to provide the answer to, and I appreciated that, and we tried to get it back as quickly as we could.
But if they don't like one of your answers, instead of working it out over the telephone, they bring you back up here and in high dudgeon act outrage and suggest that you have not been straight with the American public. And I want to give you the chance to say categorically, Mr. Koskinen, every time you've testified, have you testified to the truth, to the very best of your ability and recollection?
I have.
And how interested are you that the American public get the straight story?
I think it is critical. As I said from the start, we take the base issue seriously. Improper criteria should not have been used. We should do whatever we can to prevent it from happening again. The American public need to and deserve to be confident that they will be treated fairly no matter who they are, whatever organization they belong to, whoever they voted for in the last election, as I've said. People have to be confident if they hear from the Internal Revenue Service, it's because of an issue either in their tax return or their application. And if someone else had the same issue on their tax return or their application, they'd get treated the same way. It's critical for the integrity of the tax collection administration process for the American public to be confident about that. So I have never minimized the problem. I've always said we treat it seriously. The reason I spent time in my testimony today was to try to reassure everybody that we are taking all the actions that we can to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being back with us. I think there's three things that the American people want. First, the whole truth. The dribbling out of information, whether it be in the press or with this particular story or another, is troubling. Most recent, you mentioned the BlackBerry that actually was wiped after, indeed, an investigation had been started not just here congressionally, not just with the IG, but also an internal, according to testimony given in this room, an internal investigation that had taken place within the IRS, and that's troubling. But I also know that this does not happen on your watch. You have been given a task of cleaning up a mess. You are now the fourth commissioner of the IRS that we have the opportunity to hear. And I think the people want two things beyond the whole truth. They want the people that were responsible for this to be held accountable. They don't understand why people have not been fired or lost their job. You would agree that this was not just relegated to a couple of rogue agents now in Cincinnati. Would you not agree with that?
That's right. I think it has been, it's clear that it was a management failing on the part of the agency that needs to be corrected.
So I'm going to bring us to the third point, which is really what they want to make sure of, is that what can we do to make sure that this does not happen again, so we can start to build that trust and foundation back. You've mentioned IT failures. I know we've had a few conversations, and yet yesterday we had on the House floor a number of bills that were passed out of the House, now being sent to the Senate, that would address missing emails, senior level executive folks, in terms of those who maliciously or use their private devices to get around the Records Act, whether it be the Federal Record Act or the Presidential Records Act. Those pieces of legislation are designed to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Is that something that you can support, at least in principle? It sounds like from your testimony you're already going there.
Yes, in principle, I haven't obviously, or not obviously, I haven't seen the language of the bills, but clearly we already have a policy, and one of the things we're doing is making sure everybody understands that you cannot use your personal email for IRS business. That's been a policy. We need to reinforce that.
And you would agree that that has at least occurred on a few occasions within the IRS?
It happens. People do it inadvertently. They will send something to their home computer so they can print it out while they're working at home, and we're trying to make it clear to everybody, even that simple issue should not be taken. And we train people. We're going to retrain everyone to make sure they understand that.
All right. So let me go further, because in your testimony you talked about not having the resources to do some of the things, and as I understand it, there is this authorization that the IRS needs to pay some of their IT people above the normal GS levels. That authorization is about to expire. Is that something that you need reauthorized in terms of trying to address some of these IT needs? Because my understanding, a lot of those people are IT people. Is that correct?
People working on it. In fact, Chairman Issa has been a strong supporter over time of the fact that we need to have what's called streamlined critical pay authority to make sure that we can get the best people to come and work on those systems. And what we're trying to do to improve our IT system, to learn from this lesson and making sure that we store emails and ultimately that we have a searchable database that makes it easier. We shouldn't have to spend $18 million to get you the information you want. And as I say, I hope to talk to Chairman Issa about this. The Streamlined Critical Pay Authority only applies to a handful of people, 25 right now. Virtually all of them are technical or analytical people, and that authority would be very helpful.
So if this body does not act, what you're saying is that authority will disappear at the end of the calendar year?
The authority will disappear at the end of this calendar year, and starting in January in a phased process, because they're in various stages of their 4-year contracts, we will lose people. We'll lose in January the head of our compliance analytics unit as we go forward.
So let me close with this final question then, is if we were to give you this authority, can you assure the American people that anyone who is getting paid under this authority was not directly or indirectly involved in any of the targeting work that is going on? Can you assure the American people that that is the case?
I can assure you of that. It's 25 people, and none of them were involved in any of the use of improper criteria, any of the discussions that went on at that time.
All right. I thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Nevada is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up to my colleague, Mr. Meadows, who just, I think, laid out a very reasonable set of objectives. And I agree with him that the majority of Americans want out of this unfortunate situation with the IRS the truth. They want accountability, and they want the agency to restore trust with the American people. And I think that because of his questions, you were able to outline a number of specific recommendations that you need from Congress to do your job and the tools that you need, as well as things that you as the IRS need to do specifically to improve the management of the IRS. And I think that that's more the tone that we should be working from. not the abusive tone that we continue to have from the chairman of the subcommittee or the full committee that turns this into something that it's not. I want to ask you, Commissioner, about a letter that I and 26 of my other colleagues sent to the acting commissioner, Mr. Werfel, relating to the discrepancy between the agency's regulatory interpretation of the law dealing with 501c4s and what the U.S. Code actually enumerates in statute. Are you familiar with the request that I made along with 25 of my colleagues on June 6, 2013?
I'm not familiar with the specific language, but I do know a number of people have been encouraging us, when we look at the regulations for under the 501c4, to start with the statute which says that social welfare organizations under 501c4 should be exclusively involved in social welfare.
And the regulation states primarily.
And the regulations established in 1959 have said primarily.
Isn't that problematic?
Well, it's been around for a long time, and we have over 150,000 comments about how to deal with that issue, which we are seriously taking a look at. But it is the issue that's the spectrum is, one end of the spectrum is it should be exclusive, i.e. no activity. Another end of the spectrum is that there shouldn't be any limitations at all. And a third spot in the middle is, well, primarily some percentage, close to 50 would be a good number, and we're looking at that entire range of possibilities.
Well, until you make that final determination, this ambiguity remains. And because of the recent Citizens United decision, which created the huge influx of the number of organizations that were applying for tax exemption status, has contributed to this problem, has it not?
Well, you're right. What happens is we're still dealing with facts and circumstances. It's interesting. I've been reading, and I asked for the most thoughtful comments on both sides of each of these issues, what the definition should be, how much you should be able to do, and to whom it should apply. And there's a consensus across the political spectrum as well as the organizational spectrum that nobody thinks the present facts and circumstance test gives anybody any guidance as to how it should be.
So in addition to the critical pay authority, the searchable database, and some of the internal policies, having a review and to get a standard that is clear on this exclusive requirement would be an additional area that you would recommend?
Well, I think if the Congress wanted to take a look at this and pass it,
well, the law has already been passed.
Right. If you wanted to look at that, that would be fine. We view it as our responsibility under the regulations. To follow the law. To follow the law and to provide a regulation that, as I've said when I first started, any regulation needs to be clear, needs to be fair to everyone, and it needs to be easy to administer.
Well, and I'll add one more. It needs to be in compliance with Federal law.
And it should comply with the Federal law.
Do we have any idea how much taxpayer money is lost on granting tax exemption to groups who would otherwise be ineligible for 501c4 status?
I do not have that information.
I think that's another area that I would ask that this committee look into.
Would the gentleman yield?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask with unanimous consent to enter into the record my letter dated June 6, 2013, along with my colleagues, be entered into the record without objection.
Without objection.
Thank you. My time has expired. I yield back.
Recognize the gentleman from California for his 5 minutes.
Commissioner, it might be a good time to follow up on the gentleman from Nevada. 527 versus 501c4. 527 can do 100% political, right?
Correct. In fact,
any tax difference?
There are complicated tax issues, but basically
no.
No. Basically no.
So there's no tax money lost at all. If a 501c4 were suddenly not able to do what they're doing because we take the political free speech portion of what they can do in addition to social welfare to zero, and they became 527s, there'd be no tax ramification. Isn't that clear and simple?
Not quite. Pretty
Revenue to the taxpayers would be de minimisly zero.
might be, unless some organizations spend their money every year, and if it's a legitimate expenditure as a business expense, there's some question of what's a business expense. The second issue, if they have funds and they invest them, some organizations have capital and they keep it for a while, the earnings on those investments would be taxable, whatever kind of an organization, if they were not a C4.
But a 527, which the gentleman from Nevada runs a 527, if he thinks about it, right? He's got a PAC for his reelection.
Right. Significant differences, you know, between the 527s and the
So
501c4s.
the canard that somehow the taxpayers are funding this is simply not true, that for all practical purposes, if you raise money and spend it each year, and you don't invest it and make a whole bunch of secondary money off your investments, the taxable event on a 527 is zero.
That's right. As long as your expenditures are deductible, and there's some question about some nature of some expenditures.
Right, but a 527's expenditures can be a slam against the gentleman from Nevada, and it's okay. They can do an ad that says he's awful and he shouldn't be reelected, or they can do one that says I'm awful and shouldn't be reelected.
Will the gentleman yield for a moment?
No, the gentleman from Nevada chose not to yield. The fact is that there is no tax consequence, and I hope we can put that to rest, that although there's a hypothetical, that wouldn't be the reality. Now, let me get to one question, and I think it's an important question, and I realize you're not here as a constitutional scholar. You told me one time you gave up being a lawyer for Lent one year and never went back, and it's still the best reason to give up being a lawyer that I can think of. But before many people on the dais were born, or many of them, the NAACP versus Alabama, you know that case?
I'm not sure I do.
Well, that case was fairly simple. It said the NAACP had a right to anonymous free speech under the First Amendment. And it did so because, in fact, contributions the NAACP support were being sought by people who objected to what they were involved in. And that freedom of association and the freedom of free speech was founded. So if we look at that case, Citizens United is not so different. The fact is, people's ability to, let's say, support conventional marriage and not have the IRS leak the list of the donors so they can be targeted, that's in reality something that's pretty much ingrained in the Constitution and repeatedly the Supreme Court has set up. I want to digress a little bit, just one quick one from this, because you did mention your need for reauthorization. And I just want to touch on some areas that we're going to be talking about in reauthorization. Do you remember the name Stephen Manning?
Yes.
Now, Stephen Manning's job was he was a CIO, Enterprise Networks. Very appropriate person to look at to try to make sure that we kept him if we wanted to get to, I guess, better email retentions and so on, right?
Right.
Critical person. Now, Manning has had 2 job titles, but his total period of service was 2010, but with a small change from Associate CIO Enterprise Manager, no pay change, to Deputy CIO for Strategic Modernization. He managed to have his 4 years extended. Isn't that true?
Yes, the IG has just actually issued a report, or is in the process of issuing a report, when they've looked at all that, and they thought that we had, and they looked at everybody on the critical pay, thought that they had been appropriately appointed, and where they had new jobs or extensions, they found no problem with that.
This member finds a potential one because the current statute intends that you hire people for 4 years and they leave at the end of 4 years, not that you move the same people around and give them different titles. Let me go into one that concerns me more, and it will be a subject of any reauthorization. Jonathan Davis, you remember that name?
I do remember that name, yes.
Jonathan Davis was Chief of Staff to the Office of the Commissioner. He changed when he ran out of his time to Chief of Staff, Executive Director, Strategic and Organizational Development, Office of the Commissioner. $215,000 increased to $227,000 for a political, essentially a political choice person to work for as Chief of Staff to the Commissioner. Do you believe that the intent of Congress was to have the technical expertise of being Chief of Staff be one of them that we pay $250,000 nearly for, and that they change from being Chief of Staff to some subtitle Chief of Staff, the seemingly lower position coming second, isn't anything other than a circumvention of the intent of the 4-year limit?
As I say, the Inspector General looked at all of
No, you're not, Commissioner, you're not talking to, you're talking to the people that have to say, did you live up to the intent of Congress in our opinion, and should we reauthorize it, and should we allow somebody who was deeply involved with the Commissioner, potentially in targeting, has left, should we allow somebody to be the Chief of Staff for more than 4 years, make over $200,000 as part of this reauthorization? My time has expired.
I would not do that. I think if it were up to me, my Chief of Staff in this election would not be a critical pay.
And that's part of what this committee is going to have to be part of in reauthorization, is to make sure it's limited to 4 years and technical unless they choose to make it longer. Because I will tell you, Jonathan Davis, to me, is a poster child for somebody, mostly prior to your coming in, abusing the system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the Chairman. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, and I'd ask the Chairman to be accommodated to the tune of 1 minute and 47
I have done that thus far, and I will continue.
Pardon me?
I've done that thus far. And
I know you
continue.
have. You're always fair about time, and I thank you. Mr. Koskinen, welcome back.
Happy to be back.
And I want to join with the ranking member in thanking you for your service. You were in retirement, comfortable life, didn't have to come and do this. You did it because there was a problem at IRS, and you wanted to respond to the request to help. And it's true, is it not, that your predecessor, Mr. Werfel, he actually discovered the problem of record keeping and actually issued new guidelines for how it should be done. Is that correct?
I was not aware of that, actually.
Looking at the IG's report, are you familiar with the report that came out by Mr. Levin on the Senate Permanent Subcommittee?
I am.
And have you had a chance to review it?
I've reviewed it.
Do you agree with the findings? Are you taking action with respect to the findings?
At this point, significant part of the recommendations go to the earlier discussion about the 501c4 regulations, and we, as I say, got 150,000 comments, and those suggestions and comments from the committee will be included in our consideration.
And of course, one of the issues with respect to that has to do with the disclosure of donors. Is that not correct?
That's correct. Ultimately, the significant difference between the 527s and the 501c4s is 527s have to reveal their donors, the 501c4s do not.
And in order to qualify for 501c4 status, what must one do? What does one have to prove in order to qualify for that status?
You have to prove that under the present status that your primary purpose is social welfare.
What does the law say with respect to social welfare? What's the adverb?
The adverb in the law is exclusively.
Right. How did we manage to go from exclusively to primarily?
Well, when it was reviewed in 1959 by the Internal Revenue Service, the decision was made, and I haven't been able to have anybody tell me exactly how they came to it, that primarily would be an appropriate measure of activity.
We've used the example before. I mean, you know, if you've got a couple that's dating, there is a difference between telling each other, you know, this is an exclusive relationship versus this is my primary relationship. Primarily, I'm going to be faithful to you, as opposed to exclusively, I'm going to be faithful to you. I mean, the words really do mean different things. Do they not, even just common sense?
They do. I think in a number of areas in the code there are issues where it says something like exclusively or only, and the regulations have allowed for some leeway so that people inadvertently didn't end up in violation of the exclusion. So 501c3s basically have a standard that basically says you have to do virtually everything, but if you actually spend inadvertently some portion of your money and time on an otherwise not allowed activity, it won't cause you to lose your certificate. And I think probably what they had in mind with primarily was to not have people inadvertently get caught up in ex post facto review of what they were doing.
One might suggest it's time to return to that subject and the meaning of those two adverbs, because I think there are organizations that I don't think anybody in the public would agree are primarily, well, not exclusively, social welfare organizations. They are primarily political organizations, and that's fine, but that's not what the law called for, and the interpretation is very liberal. In the time remaining to me, I want to go back to the TIGTA report. The IG was informed, or the IG office was made aware as early as January 2012 that the IRS used BOLOs that included the words occupy and others that could be associated with progressive groups. Are you aware of that fact, that they were notified as early as January 2012?
I did not know that until I read the report.
Assuming that's corroborated, can you explain why the audit, knowing that 2 months back in January 2012, nonetheless would only look at conservative trigger words in its audit on BOLOs?
I don't know the background of that, what the IG was doing. I think the IG would have to answer that question.
Is it true that since the release of the TIGTA report, the IRS has eliminated BOLO listings for conservative as well as progressive groups?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Those lists and anything that looks like those lists is no longer used. As I say, we've taken the problem seriously, and we're anxious to make sure it never happens again.
If the problem were exclusively targeting conservative groups, such as Tea Party or Patriot, why would you eliminate BOLOs for progressive groups?
Again, I think judging an organization as to whether it is subject to more review or whether it qualifies simply by the name of the organization is improper, whatever the name of the organization is. So whether that has progressive or some other kind of liberal-sounding name, or Tea Party or some other conservative-sounding name, the name itself should not be the criteria.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the extra time, and thank you, Mr. Koskinen, for your service to your country.
I thank the gentleman. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you put up your original slides from your original testimony, please? Mr. Koskinen, there's a lot of debate back and forth here, and so I'd like to get your take on here. Can you, Mr. Schuman denied any targeting. Would you agree with that?
I'm sorry, denied?
Would you deny or confirm number 1 up there?
Well, there's been this long debate as to whether the use of improper criteria is targeting or not. Clearly, the IG report made a finding that none of us have disagreed with, that improper criteria were used. Okay. To move to the next step and say whether it was targeting or not is, in fact, the basis of a lot of the discussion back and forth. But clearly, the improper criteria were used.
I agree. We're just going to go through this kind of quickly, if you can help me out here. A learner denies any targeting. Second one. Can you confirm or deny that second one?
Again, there's this issue. So that clearly improper criteria were used, and it was applied to organizations in a way that it shouldn't have.
So once again, you're upholding number 1 and number 2, right? That they were false and misleading statements.
False. Well, I'm saying targeting is not a word that I use as a matter. The IG didn't use it.
Semantics.
Well, some people attach a lot of significance to semantics. If the question is, were those misleading to the extent that they maintain improper criteria were not used, then that was not true. The improper criteria were used.
Let's go to 3. This makes it easy. So learner apologizes for line people in Cincinnati. True or false?
Apologizes for?
That this happened because of line people in Cincinnati. True or false?
I think that probably, from what I understand, is not true.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And Jay Carney also blamed line people in there, so that's a false statement as well.
I think on the basis of what everybody now knows, this was not a problem only in Cincinnati.
That's what I thought. And we go down to number 5. Mr. Werfel commits to producing all the learner emails. We know that's not possible, right?
But that's not because he didn't try or we didn't try. But that's right. We do not have all of our emails. We have produced all the emails that we have. And probably all of us, when we say we're going to produce everything, should say everything that we have.
So I like number 6. So the President in his Sunday address in front of the mainstream media with Bill O'Reilly talks not even a smidgen of corruption here. Would that have been a wise comment to say?
Well, as I said at a time at one of these hearings early on, back and forth, there have been a lot of people making judgments and statements before all the investigations are done. And generally, I think people are well advised to see what goes on. But I don't think there's been any evidence at this point that I know of corruption as most people would think of it. Mistakes were made.
Whoa. And Ms. Lerner's activities would not constitute a violation?
A violation of the law?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's a referral in the Justice Department where we will determine that.
So I think you have to be recalcitrant in what you just said there. Anybody, you'd have to eliminate Ms. Lerner in that.
You're right. There's a question about Ms. Lerner. Exactly right.
Well, see, and that brings me to my point. Are you familiar with the term, trust is a series of promises kept? Have you ever heard that? Trust is a series of promises kept.
No, but I like that.
Isn't it nice? And I think that's what the American people deserve in regards to the IRS. Mr. Meadows, a number of the other on the dais, they want the facts. And right now, we've seen this play out over and over again, brought up that there's not a smidgen of corruption in the IRS. And there's a reason why the people are scared of the IRS, right? The power to tax is the power to destroy.
Well, we don't tax, we simply collect, but people do worry that if you don't pay your taxes, we're not going to be happy, and that's true.
Yeah. And how do you feel about the law? I mean, we're a law-abiding country, right? Should be.
I personally feel everyone should follow the law. The IRS follows the law. I think it's the law of the land. It should be obeyed.
Okay. Then I want to ask you, you're familiar with the Federal Records Act, right?
Yes.
Everybody should be, particularly if they spend any time in the Federal government, right?
Correct.
Do you believe the IRS violated that act in any way, shape, or form?
My understanding, the NARA reviewed our Record-Keeping Act for 11 and 12 or 12 and 13 and rated us over 95% each year. The NARA said that if we had destroyed, our new records had been destroyed, Ian and Lois Lerner's email loss, we had an obligation to advise NARA, but there's no evidence yet as to whether those were records that were destroyed or not. But if they were and we did not advise NARA, then that was in fact not consistent with the law. But thus far, there's no evidence that we knew that records were destroyed, and we have advised NARA, and we're working with them, as I said, to try to make sure that none of this happens again to the extent we can prevent it.
Well, let me ask you, and I know a little indulgence here. When you find out issues, you'll notify us at the same time as the White House and the DOJ?
Yes. I would just note that we have not passed any of this information on to either the White House or the Department of Justice.
Okay. And when we review this philanthropic aspect or this narrative about 501c3s, narratives, are you going to be equal opportunity and review the Tides Foundation?
I'm going to review them all. I've asked for, as I said, the most thoughtful comments on both sides of the issue of what's the definition of political activity, how much of it should be allowed, and to whom should it apply. And my goal is that whatever regulation comes out should be not only clear, it should be fair to everyone, and it should be easy to administer. And I'm committed to trying to make that happen.
I appreciate the gentleman's answers.
I thank the gentleman. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. My alarm clock went off this morning. I woke up. It was Groundhog Day. You were back on the schedule, back on the time, coming here under the same similar kind of situations. I mean, I look again, we had conversations. I'm going to talk to you about it. But on September 5th, 2014, disclosed that there were more emails received by 5 other employees in addition to Ms. Lerner had been destroyed. Now we find out 760 unsearched IRS exchange drives, which have really never been discussed because mainly you thought they had been destroyed, have not been searched. So there's no way that we can say that everything has really been complied with. I agree at one point with my gentleman friend from Virginia. I believe exclusively and primarily do have meanings. And I believe exclusively and primarily can have a very similar meaning because I believe exclusively and primarily the IRS is a tax collection agency that should be above reproach, should have truth and honesty with the American people, fidelity to do their job, and we've talked about this before, because I am extremely, take extreme pressure, or however you want to put it with those two words, in my own faithfulness to my wife and others, but you seem to be following me around. I went home to August recess and spent several town halls, went everywhere, and everywhere I went, there was a question. What about the IRS? What's going on? They lost emails, and if they were serious about it or not laughing about it or saying, "Are you kidding me?" it was just a continual breakdown of trust everywhere we went. Now we're getting ready to go home in October. We find this out some more. And before I ask a just specific question, I asked this to you last time. And so like I said, we're experiencing Groundhog Day again as we go through here. What is the problem that we can't seem to not have something else come out? We're going to leave for October, come back in November, December. I expect to see you back here. I hope not to have another discovery that there's computers that are missing again or not. Help me out here. Just tell me the truth.
I've tried to tell you the truth every time I've been here. I would note
Somebody's undermining you.
there might
Because
be,
you may be trying, because it keeps coming out.
Right. Well, it keeps coming out. What came out and has come out on September 5th is somehow an implication there are emails out there that we didn't find. Nobody has found a single email that I know.
But have you looked in
any of that.
these areas, which has already been stated you didn't know they were because you thought they'd been destroyed?
Okay, but nobody said, would you like to know what the story with the servers is?
At this point, yes.
All right. What story with the servers is that they weren't looked at because when we changed in 2010 or 2011 and upgraded our Microsoft Office, all the data on the old servers was put on the new servers. So when people were searching for servers, A, they thought the old ones were destroyed. Even if we knew they were there was no data on them that wasn't on the servers we had.
Okay, but I
So
guess
at this point, if somebody found new emails, A, I'd be delighted, but B, it's not as if somebody is finding more emails at this point. So what we have is an implication for the public that, like the mysterious backup system that is government-wide that has Lois Lerner emails on it, there's been a continual implication that suddenly new emails are being found, or it's possible they might be found. Thus far, nobody has produced another email, although, as I say, if they could, I told the IG it would be terrific. But thus far, nobody has.
at this point in time, like I said, it is just continually, this go back to this exclusive and primary, what is the role, and then the trust factor that is just completely gone.
I agree with your statements about trust and that we should be, people should have confidence in us. They should view us as tax administrators only. They should feel they're going to get treated fairly, and we should do that for them, and I totally agree with that.
Well, I want to go back to our previous meeting, as we were here that night, and on July 23rd, 2014, I'd asked you if IRS had produced all the emails from Holly Paz, William Wilkins, and Jonathan Davis, as required by the subpoena, which is here. Not surprising, your answer was no. Today, 56 days later, I'm going to ask you the exact same questions. Have you produced all emails to and from Chief Counsel William Wilkins as required by this subpoena?
No.
Have you produced all emails to and from Holly Paz as required by this subpoena?
At this point, you have about 7,500 emails from her. We expect that there are another 45,000 we are going through, and any of those that aren't duplicates we will provide to you, and we hope to do that before the fall is out. That's what we're focused on now. The answer to the other parts of the subpoena below Lois Lerner and Holly Paz are we haven't gotten to those yet, and we look forward to continuing to work with the committee. Some of those requests are to search 90,000 email hard drives to find emails.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there. As an attorney who did not give up being an attorney for Lent, your answer is eloquent, but the answer would be no.
I said, no, I agree.
Okay.
No, except Holly
Jonathan
Paz.
Davis.
Holly Paz, you got 7,500, and we're working through the next 45,000.
But again, if you repeat from all, if I included that word all, whereas you just said a few minutes ago, words do have meanings, and I do place meaning on it, all would be no.
All would be no.
Jonathan Davis, all as required by this subpoena, no. Ms. Cotton, I wish you the best. I do. And I know that may sound strange, but the problem is coming back to this every single time. It goes back, as I said, you follow me, and I think follow many members on both parties around because of the agency in which you are head of now and the issues that we keep developing over trust and fidelity and clarity and exclusive and primarily, and we can go down every adverb in the world. It all bottoms down to trust. And right now, as others in this committee would like to talk about what is the new definition for how you're going to examine these tax statuses, that's all great for another hearing. This has nothing to do with that hearing. This is, in fact, are we getting to the bottom of what did happen so that we can move forward? And I would love to see, I'm sure we'll see you again. I hope it's not in a Groundhog Day moment in which, here we go again, something else is out there that undermines the very trust that is
But one thing I would, if I could add, just to try to
We'll go as long as
add
you
to the
want
record. We in March notified the investigative committees that we had produced all the emails we could find and were identified as being relevant to the determination process.
Okay, well, stop. Let me stop right here. Let's just hold this right here. The subpoena does not ask for all and relevant. And I know there was some discussion about, let's clarify this.
No.
We were almost to the end here. And I was actually going to reel back and go from here until, when we ask for all, let's
That's fine. No, my point,
definitionally, all is all.
all is all. No,
Thank you.
my only point is the all that we are getting is a lot of stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the determination process, but we're happy to provide it, and we are committed to continuing to work to provide you all of those.
But I believe the subcommittee chairman, the chairman has said all. And I know Mr. Jordan has asked for all.
And
not a filter, not a dit, as I like to hear from my wife, if you got bad news, give me all. Don't just, send it out in small streams. This is the problem we're having. Just, it's a subpoena.
You're going to
get them all.
You're going to get them all. Some of them are going to take a while because you want them from 90,000 people. Well, you will get them all. You'll get them all.
Whether that's an issue for you and I to have there, all is all. That's what the committee's asked for. I'm asking for the committee. Mr. Costa, have a good day.
Thank the gentleman. Gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized.
I thank the gentleman, and because I was at another hearing and am scooting off to yet another hearing today.
It's a busy day.
It's a busy day. Thank you for being here. I'm going to yield my time to the chairman, Mr. Jordan.
I thank the gentlelady. Okay, we'll go finish here, and then we'll do a quick second round, and I know we have votes probably in 30 minutes. Mr. Koskinen, earlier you said all we have to do is ask. Get on the phone, call you, and you'll give us whatever we want. Seems to me, though, there's some information that frankly, you should volunteer that's of such critical nature, you should give that to us. We shouldn't have to learn, for example, that there are 760 backup servers. We should have to learn that from the IG. That's something you should have told us. We shouldn't have to learn from the IG that there's a separate OCS chat system that's at the IRS that Ms. Lerner was pleased wasn't recorded and kept. We shouldn't have to learn that from the IG. We should have learned that from the IRS. We shouldn't have to learn from a deposition that there were 9 backup tapes. That's something you should have told us. We shouldn't have to learn from a judge, based on Judicial Watch's FOIA action, that Ms. Lerner's BlackBerry was wiped clean. You should have told us that. We shouldn't have to learn from Judicial Watch's FOIA request that the IRS gave 1.1 million pages of information, 21 disks of information, some of it containing 6103 confidential information, to the Justice Department. You should have told us those kind of things. That's all pertinent to the investigation, critical facts pertinent to the investigation. But no, you make us come get it. And then when we do ask you, you don't answer our question. You don't help us out. Because we asked repeatedly, we wanted to interview certain witnesses, and you said, nope, can't do it. There's an ongoing investigation. So the point, you can't have it both ways. You can't sit here in committee and say, all you can do is call us. Then when we call you and we try to get witnesses, nope, can't interview them. We had to subpoena them. So you can't have it both ways. But here's where I really want to go. Mr. Meadows earlier on said that you came and spoke to him, and I want to make sure I say this right, about reauthorizing the Streamlined Critical Pay Authority. Is that right, Mr. Koskinen? That's something you're looking to do?
Yes.
And this is to pay people more than the top level of the federal employee pay scale, something higher than the top level, and requires statutory authority to do that, correct?
That's correct. It was granted to the IRS in 1998 and has been granted and operated until 2013.
Understand. We did a little investigation and looked at the people who are currently, over the last 5 years, getting paid more than the top employees under the normal and customary federal employee pay scale. And we're going to put that up on the screen if we can. Our calculation was 83 different folks are paid above this level. And we've got one sample page, and we can probably scroll through the pages.
Over 5, there are 25 right now on the program.
I'm talking the last 5 years, 83 different people over the last 5 years, frankly, the relevant time frame that we've been looking at when this targeting started to roll and took place. 83 different people, and 56 of them, the business unit says information technology. So 56 of them are IT folks, making $202,000, $227,000, getting performance bonuses of $28,000, $19,000, $19,000, $20,000. So making 200 in some cases, as the chairman said, in some cases almost $250,000. And you think this should continue?
Yes, those people, and not all of them make 220, some are at 160 or 170. These are people, for instance, the guy who runs our IT system who worked in the private sector, probably making 4 times that amount. If you go through all of those, in fact, one of the requirements is that they have to have been making multiples of what they're making here, which is part of the reason that they get hired under the Streamline Authority. But they are primarily technical people, primarily modeling and analytical people, all of whom should have, if the program was run and the IG just completed a review of it and said we did fine,
56,
all of them should have been making significantly more.
56 out of 83 are making higher than the highest employee is supposed to make in the federal employee pay scale. Many of them making $250,000. Many of them getting bonuses of over $20,000.
I would stress again, there are only 25 now. The program is limited to 40 at any time, and we've never had 40 at any time. So over 5 years, it means people have been moving in and out, which is what the program is supposed to do.
Well, here's my question. 56 of them are IT people. You're asking us to reauthorize this at a time when IT people making $250,000 at a time when you lost Lois Lerner's emails. That's what you're coming forward to do.
Ms. Lerner's email crash occurred 3 years ago, and as I said, it wasn't the email.
At a time when you told us you didn't tell us there were any backup tapes, we find out there are. At a time you didn't tell us there were 760 servers, but there are. At a time when you didn't tell us that her BlackBerry was wiped clean, but it has. At a time when you're telling us you had trouble retaining the records, you had a duty to keep the records, disclose them. All this is going on, and yet you still think it's appropriate to come to Congress and say, you know what, in spite of all this, all these problems with our information technology, all these problems, and the fact that we lost emails from the key person in this investigation, at that time you're coming to Congress and say, you know what, I need special statutory authority to keep paying IT people over $200,000 and give them $20,000 bonuses.
There's a statutory limit. You can't make $220,000 and get a $20,000 bonus. But I am coming here and asking for that.
I see it right here.
These are the senior people running us. If we do not have the ability to keep them or replace them in the course of the program, it runs a real risk of crippling the agency. And that's, I think, important for people to understand. I would not ask for it willy-nilly. It is a small program.
I'm not saying you're asking for it willy-nilly. I'm saying it takes a lot of gumption to come to Congress and say, you know what, we just lost our emails, but we need special authority to pay IT people more than anyone else in the federal government can make and give them $20,000 bonuses. That's what I'm asking.
And I'm just telling you that the people who run our online services program, the people who run the IT department.
Maybe you should switch. Maybe you need to hire a few more people at a lower salary who are actually going to do the job, and we wouldn't lose Lois Lerner's emails. Maybe think about that approach versus the approach you're taking.
We have, as I said, taken the approach that we're going to fix that problem. We're going to actually have our senior executives immediately store on a separate shared drive rather than on the hard drives. I agree with you that storing emails on hard drives.
Don't you think that the taxpayer might say, we're giving $20,000 bonuses, paying people over $200,000. It takes a special law to do this. Are we getting our money's worth here? They lost Lois Lerner's emails.
You can go on our website. 200 million people have pushed an app that says, where's my refund? Immediately you can find it. That's what these people did. You can go on an app on our website and push an app and get your transcript in the last year only, and that's what these people did. We are actually trying to make life easier for taxpayers through technology, and to do that, we have to have the best people.
Yeah, and what remedy are you telling people who were systematically targeted, had their First Amendment rights abused, and the person at the center of the scandal, we can't even find her emails? What do you say to them? What button do they push?
You have 76,000 of her emails?
No, I'm not asking about that. I'm asking what button do they push? You lost her emails. You're paying people $250,000, giving them bonuses. What button do they push? No, that's a question.
That's a good question, and you can ask that question. I'm just telling you that the 25 people on that program are critical across the agency. If you want to deny us
When you find that button, that's a button we're trying to find. That's a button we're trying to push to get to the bottom of that, how people's First Amendment rights were abused. With that, I'd recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Koskinen, just so it's clear, when did you start as Commissioner of the IRS?
December 23rd last year, part of my holiday celebration.
And what were you doing before that?
I was on two publicly traded company boards and basically semi-retired.
So you were not even working at the IRS in any capacity before December 23rd of 2013?
That's correct.
Okay. So when you talk about, for example, computer hard drive crashes, were those things happening after you started at the IRS?
Hard drive crashes continue as we speak.
Of course. I'm talking about Lois Lerner's BlackBerry exchange. Did that happen before or after you started at the IRS?
It was all before I was there. All of the issues that we've been holding hearings about occurred before I came.
And you're the one here coming to get hollered at for all of that. And are you here under subpoena today, Mr. Koskinen?
No, I come voluntarily.
You've come voluntarily to do that. And again, it's been said before, but I thank you for your service to the United States. This is an amazing act of selflessness that you do this for our nation, and that you look into ways that we can improve our systems and transparency and accountability in the way we collect taxes in this country. And to that end, much of your testimony today was talking about looking forward, going forward and making sure these things get better as time goes on with the IRS. First of all, to the point about whether you pay people, what happens if you don't pay the market rate, the going rate for IT people? What happens to those people?
Our systems will, in fact, we will not be able to make the improvements we want to. We have a very complicated, we have an antiquated Model T we're running. Some of the applications we're running when John F. Kennedy was president. We're trying to upgrade all of that. If we don't have the appropriate leadership, that's not going to happen, and we're going to have an IT system that makes no more progress.
And I understand this is beyond the comprehension of some of the members here, but if you don't pay people the going rate, the market rate for what they're worth, they wander off and they find better jobs, don't they?
All of these people, as I say, made 3 to 4 times what we're paying them. All of them have options to go elsewhere, and a reasonable number of people, as the Chairman had noted, have rotated through the program. They've been here and then they've gone back out. They have no problem. None of the people working for us will have a problem. They won't be unemployed for a day.
Commissioner Koskinen, last May, the Inspector General issued a report finding that, quote, ineffective management, unquote, at the IRS allowed inappropriate criteria to be developed and stay in place for more than 18 months. It resulted in substantial delays in processing certain applications and allowed unnecessary information requests to be issued. And the IG has repeatedly testified that his audit did not uncover any evidence of political motivation behind the inappropriate handling of these applications by IRS employees. And you're familiar with that report, I take it?
I am.
The IG report also contains several recommendations to address the IRS management failures that led to the inappropriate handling of applications for tax-exempt status. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
Has the IRS implemented all of the IG's recommendations?
All of those recommendations have been implemented.
And can you describe what additional steps the IRS has taken to ensure that the management failures that led to the inappropriate handling of applications for tax-exempt status do not occur again?
Yes, I included in my oral statement and my full statement discussion of the other activities, some of the other activities we're taking, because I do think it's important for the committee as well as for the American public to understand we take the problem seriously, including the difficulties with both saving and finding emails. We are doing our best to make sure none of these problems happen again and that we take them seriously. And I think it's important, as I say, I want the committee members and as well as the public to know that we have done everything that anybody's recommended thus far to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I am looking forward, as I said from the start, to reports from the various investigative bodies, their findings of fact, but most importantly, their recommendations that we should consider. But thus far, we've taken the recommendations we found that we were able to implement, and I think we've made major progress in ensuring, and it's important for the public to feel confident about that and comfortable, ensuring that we don't have this problem again.
Well, again, I want to take the opportunity to thank you for your public service and also for your testimony. This is the kind of testimony that you're required to answer our questions, and you're also required to anticipate what questions might be important to us so that you volunteer the answers to those questions even without being asked. It's a tough job, and I don't envy you. Thank you for coming, Mr. Koskinen.
Thank you. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. One of, I guess, the issues here is using federal tax dollars for political either targeting. We know the Hatch Act. I think Politico ran a story. This came home to me just a couple of days ago, where we had federal employees in my district that had been sharing actually with people who are supporters of mine to make sure that they don't vote for me. Now, I had a choice to make, to either make a big deal of it, which I didn't, or to try to just ignore it. When you run for office, you get thick skin, or if not, you really need to have thick skin. And so your choice in December of last year is the closest thing I can think of to anybody running for political office. But with that being said, Politico ran a story about an IRS worker who was suspended for urging people to re-elect Mr. Obama. Are you aware of that, a violation of the Hatch Act?
I am aware of that.
Okay. Do we have a recording? Let's play the recording, and here I think it gets to the underlying point on some of this, that we've got to come clean and restore it.
Internal Revenue Service. This is Mr. Ashton. My ID number is 1,247-366. How may I help you?
I'm sorry, what was the number again? 1,000?
1,000.
Yep.
247. 366.
All right, and sorry, your name again?
Eli Select.
Eli, thank you.
A like again. S like soon. O like Obama. And N like November.
You know, when you have these kind of things that happen, you know, you're a big agency, I understand that. But this gentleman, as I understand it, was suspended, is that correct?
I don't know the details, and in fact, privacy laws don't allow me to testify in
all right,
public.
let me ask you.
I'm happy to have somebody give you all a briefing.
Well, is he working for the IRS today?
That I don't know, but we will find that information out for you.
So you don't know whether this guy is employed today and working for you today?
No, all I can say is we take these situations very seriously. There's an image somehow that in the Federal Government nobody ever gets terminated for cause. I would say in the determination issue, the top 5 people you start with, a commissioner on down, aren't there anymore in terms of accountability. We, without getting into the details and numbers, have a significant number of employees every year terminated. They're terminated either because they, in fact, take actions like this. They're terminated because they willfully don't pay their taxes regularly, although we have a great workforce. We have the highest tax compliance rate. It's over 99%. But we take it very seriously, and the employees understand that. And I think it's important, and we continue to reinforce it, that with regard to politics, no IRS employee during their official hours at all should do anything that sends any signal, one way or the other, about their political beliefs. We need to be non-political. We are in the tax administration business, and people have to understand that is our business, and that if people want to, on their own time on weekends, do whatever they want, that's fine.
It's a
But
free
the law is
country,
clear, and we take that very seriously.
But when we hear things like this, the more you dig, the more you feel like you've got to dig, because when you start to hear these kinds of things, and really if they were not terminated, it gives me great concern that this kind of environment will truly, it will foster more people to do it if there is really no repercussion.
I'm happy to get you there, but I feel very strongly, as you do, that if people are going to engage in political activity while they work, that's a cause for termination.
Okay. Let me maybe ask then, we've got just a couple of seconds left, and I think we'll go to the gentleman from Nevada here. You've got counsel here with you. Can they inquire, and I mean, obviously this is not, can they inquire and get you the answer so we can have that before the hearing is over today? Where this
as I say, on an individual matter, I can't publicly give you the answer, but we could give it to you not to.
Well, all I know is his
can,
first name and his ID. I have no idea who his last name is. I just need to know, is he still working for the IRS or not?
Why don't we do our best to check on that, and if we can't get it to you before this is over, we'll get it to you promptly. Could you have a?
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from Nevada is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Meadows, you had me at the first round. The second round, I just find it interesting that we would use one example of one employee when there's some 90,000 employees.
If the gentleman will yield, I mean, this came personally to me. I actually had a VA employee that was campaigning against me just the other day that I found out. And so, you know, it really, we all know that whether they're Democrat or Republican, that the federal tax dollar is not any place that needs to be promoting. I wouldn't want them campaigning against you. And vice versa. So I appreciate the gentleman
Reclaiming my time. I believe that there are certain staff, including Ms. Lerner, who have not served this administration well. That due to poor management, poor decision-making, we are in a position to have these types of hearings. And I'm not going to defend every action or every decision that certain former staffers of the IRS have taken. But I also think it is inappropriate for members of this committee to apply such a broad brush to all staff or all management of the IRS or other federal agencies. I also think it takes a lot of gumption of certain members of Congress to question the request for critical pay authority when this is the least productive Congress in the history of Congresses. Working people, hardworking people, can't get a raise, but members of Congress continue to get paid whether they do their job or get anything done around here or not. At the same time that we're having this hearing, which is the 15th hearing, there is a debate going on the floor right now that is crucial to our country's safety, to international relations, and is one of the most serious issues that this Congress is being confronted with. But instead, this chairman has decided to have the 15th hearing on the same issue, trying to assert the same allegations and never getting to the point of action on anything. So, Mr. Chairman, either we get on with the business of the American people that they have sent us here, or we need to stop wasting time and taxpayer resources. There are important issues that we need to be tackling. But unfortunately, this committee's time has been wasted, in large part. Commissioner, I will take you at your word that you are working in earnest on this regulation. because I think that this is part of the problem. We had nearly 200,000 applications filed for tax-exempt status between 2010 and 2012. 73,319 applications in 2012 alone. Your agency at that time did not approve about 22,000 of them. This is the world after Citizens United. And my colleagues on the other side, the chairman of this full committee, may want to say that this has nothing to do with it, but it has everything to do with it. And just because someone decides to make a donation to a 501c4 does not necessarily guarantee that that tax-exempt status should apply if they are not meeting the standard of the law, the federal law. And for us to not get a clear answer from the agency as to why, since 1959, the agency has been out of compliance with the federal law is the basis of the problem. So I'm not here to attack individual members of the IRS. I'm not here to cast aspersions on every action that's been taken, but I am here to hold you guys accountable. And one thing that I will do every hearing is to ask you, what is the status of you coming into compliance with the federal statute that requires the exclusive benefit to the social welfare, not the primarily benefiting social welfare? So I will take you at your word that that is something that you are earnestly working on, and I await your action and recommendations to this Congress. Thank you.
We'll just finish with a quick closing statement from myself and the ranking member. I would just say this, the previous member offered a critique of Mr. Meadows for bringing up this example. This was brought to light, not by us, but by the Office of the Special Counsel, and it's entirely appropriate. This whole thing's about politics. The gentleman from Nevada said that, to use this political example, he didn't feel was appropriate. That's what this is all about. What is?
Will the gentleman yield?
In just a second. People were systematically targeted for their political beliefs. That's what took place here. Because conservative groups around the country disagreed with the president, they were systematically harassed and targeted. That's as political as it gets. That's a violation of the most fundamental aspect of the First Amendment, your right to speak out against your government. This example is one where he was supporting violating the Hatch Act. What took place at the IRS, though, was targeting of the Bill of Rights of First Amendment. And the member said, it's a waste of time to dig into that? Are you kidding me? This is as fundamental as it gets. This is why we should have hearing after hearing to find out exactly what happened. And again, I'll repeat, if the IRS would be a little more forthcoming and give us straight answers, that would be a lot more helpful. That would help us get to the truth a lot sooner and hopefully protect people's most fundamental liberties as we move forward. I'll yield to the gentleman if he still wants to be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue of the political nature is the fact that these hearings continue to make the political accusations, even though after 15 hearings, there's nothing to substantiate that accusation. Well, and their wrongdoing that did occur needs to be held accountable. And one of the ways to hold that accountable is by making sure that the regulation, which is not in compliance with the federal law, do you agree that there is a ambiguity between the federal law?
Reclaiming my time. The reason we bring Mr. Koskinen back is because on March 26th of this year, he told this committee, full committee actually, Mr. Cummings actually asked the question. He said he'd get us all of Ms. Lerner's emails, even though at that time his chief counsel already knew they couldn't. His chief counsel knew in February that there was a problem with Ms. Lerner's hard drive, but they waited till June to tell us. And then he told us that he could confirm there were no backup tapes, and we've learned that's wrong. So once again, I mean, those are just a couple examples. We have a bunch more that I cited in my opening statement. The reason we keep bringing Mr. Koskinen back is because when he tells us something, we later learn it's not accurate. And so in the interest of good government, in the interest of the truth, we give him a chance to fix the record time and time. And I'll tell you what, this will come as no surprise to anyone, I'm going to keep bringing him back. Every time he says something, it turns out not to be true. The fact that he came here, you had a guy violate the Hatch Act, it's been reported in the press, and he can't even tell if he still works at the IRS. Now, I know there are lots of employees there, but there aren't many of them who get referenced in the paper for violating the Hatch Act for political activity. You'd think he would know if that guy's still working there. Doesn't. So we're going to give him a chance to give us that answer at some point. Yield to the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll keep coming to these hearings too. And I will keep doing what we are expected to do, and many of these things we agree on. We need to protect accountability of our government. We need to protect legal responsibility. We need to make sure that our laws are not violated by people who are unrepentant and are not chastised or fired or fined or imprisoned for it. We need to protect the First Amendment rights of the people. We need to protect people's rights to engage in politics in a fair and forthright manner. And above all, we need to protect our American democracy and protect it so that it isn't stolen away from us in the dark of night. And that's what I'm really worried about. I'm worried about the difference. Anyone who's listening to these hearings, we talk a lot about the difference between the 529s. The chairman of the full committee brought this up. The difference between the 529s and the 501c4s. And this whole fistfight that's going on right now is about 501c4s. So what's the difference between 529s and 501c4s? Both of them are tax statuses for outfits that people put money into, and are they going to use it for political purposes and advertising? The difference is not in the taxation. The difference is in the disclosure. It is in the transparency. It is in the accountability, because the 501c4s don't have to disclose their donors. That's why this is so important. That's why so many applications were put in for 501c4 status by outfits and people that wanted to contribute to politics and not be identified. And so we're talking about people and entities that wanted to go undisclosed, that wanted to remain secret, that wanted to be hidden from the American people and put all this money in and direct American politics and distort American democracy with this money. And I don't apologize because I call it dark money, because nobody knows where it came from, whom it came from, or even whether it came from foreign countries and foreign nationals. We don't know that with 501c4s. And that's why, Mr. Koskinen, it is so vital that we go back to exclusively engaging in social welfare as opposed to primarily. The difference between those words is vast. And if we go back to only granting 501c4 status to outfits that exclusively engage in social welfare, we don't have to worry about dark money wrecking our American democracy. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. The committee will be adjourned.